On the Dallas Opera Network, you're listening to Opera Box Score.
Let's get ready to rumble!
Wherever you are, however you're listening, it is America's talk radio show about opera. It is Opera Box Score. I'm your host, George Cedarquist, mercifully alone, because we're doing one of those best of podcast-only weeks. This week, we kick it off with an interview that was so good, no one actually remembers doing it. And then, a new segment that was so good, we didn't even have a title. Gonna get to that in a second. Make sure that you get your voice heard on the show. You can send a voice memo or email us your thoughts, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You want to get that OBS beer coaster, get that OBS lapel pin just for sharing your hot take. If you have sent us a listener mailbag email or voice memo, you know what I'm talking about. You know that the merch is real, and we send it anywhere in the world. We have listeners in, say, London who have been able to get merch. Talk a little bit of sports before we get right into it. The Kentucky Derby, the most exciting 2 minutes in all of sports. I'm not a huge fan of horse racing, although my aunt spent many years working in the horse racing industry. I do like to watch the Kentucky Derby. I love the trumpet playing. I love the infield and the outfield. And sure, I'll watch 2 minutes of horse racing. Please tell me you did not know Rich Strike was going to win the Kentucky Derby at 80-1 odds. That is the second longest ever long shot to win the Kentucky Derby. It was a great race. 80-1. That's how you make easy money. 80-1. Rich Strike. Let's talk some opera.
Chalk Talk on Opera Box Score.
In October of 2021, Oliver went inside the huddle with dreamy tenor Charles Castronovo, and he literally does not remember a thing that they talked about in the interview, so you're just going to have to listen and figure out what was discussed. Oliver Camacho with Charles Castronovo.
Matt and I recalled we declared that your Lenski, I forget how many years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago it was?
3 to 4 years ago, yeah.
It was the best singing at Lyric Opera House that year by a man.
Oh,
I think
that's
you were
really
competing
nice.
with Sandra Rabanowski singing Norma or something like that. But
Yeah. Okay, it's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was definitely the most like moving and authentic and just deluxe toned Lenski I've ever heard. And then I started saying, who is this guy? Like, how come I don't know what's going on with him? So I went back to my recordings and I saw that you had a Rossini Stabat Mater. I was like,
Oh my God, I'm from like 9 million years ago.
that doesn't sound, is this the same guy? I mean, clearly from the time you made that Rossini recording till the time I heard you singing in Onegin, some things have happened.
Yes.
And you're back here in Chicago, which is why we're able to get you as a guest. And you have one more performance of Elixir of Love. And by the time the audience hears this, you'll already be back in Europe or wherever you're going next.
Mm-hmm.
But can we talk about why you're singing Nemorino right now? Not that I'm not happy about it. I'm actually thrilled that you are. But, is there a story as to why Nemorino at Lyric?
Yeah. Actually, the story is it was supposed to be Manon from Massenet. That was the scheduled opera that I was contracted for, actually with the same cast. So, but from what I understand, because of the COVID craziness, it's a huge cast in Manon. Not only is it the four, let's say, main principals, but there is a huge kind of smaller role cast, with very important roles. You got the three. I mean, there's just a ton of them. So I think in the end, they decided that it would be better to do something a bit more compact. And so they tried to find an opera that kind of just translated over with the same voice types that we had ready. Yeah. So they came up with Elixir, which, to be honest, at first I thought, oh God, Elixir, I haven't sung that in 6 or 7 years or something. I'm not sure I want to do that. And but my manager Alan Green, we were talking. He said, "Hey, listen, Caruso and Bergonzi and Pavarotti, they all sang Nemorino well into the very end of their career." He said, maybe it's nice and healthy. It's good. It's a mix up from some of the other, let's say, more full things you're doing. And I thought, yeah, maybe you're right. I haven't been to America in a while. It would be nice. So in the end, I have to say, I've been having a ton of fun. It's been great. I was very pleased with myself that I was still able to sing it, very well. The fast parts are, let's say, a little tricky, but there's no coloratura, which would have been a no-go for me.
That thing goes by pretty fast.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of kind of pattery stuff, but I'm still able to do it. And the big problem with Nemorino is it's not that it's high; it's just that it sits in the passaggio the whole evening, nonstop, and you're on stage all the time. So you really have to be disciplined with your passaggio. So for me, it was like a test or a checkup to see if I've still got things in order. And so for me, it's been a very positive situation.
Well, I spoke to you recently for my other job, and we were talking about the role of Alfredo, which you have a recording of now. And so I'm just listening to your voice and thinking, oh, this guy is ready to sing, Ricardo in Masked Ball, or ready to sing Don Carlo. Yeah. Is that what's happening to you?
Yes. Yeah. It's been a slow process. I've always been patient enough, even when I didn't feel like being patient. I was patient enough, adding roles slowly, taking calculated risks when I felt it was a good chance to do that. The first time I sang Edgardo in Lucia, for example, was in Brussels. It was a nice, relatively small opera house with a good acoustic. And I remember my manager, him and I do well together because he always thinks I can do things, a certain role, maybe 2 years before I think I can do it. So we sometimes find a happy medium, where it's, 1 year later, or sometimes we wait, or sometimes I think, maybe you're right. And I try it someplace small and I say, you were right. I can do that pretty well now. So we're going back and forth on this. But I remember with Edgardo, for example, he had offers for me for 2 to 3 years. And I kept saying, I don't feel it yet. I don't think so. He said, okay, fine. We'll wait. Finally, I did it. And, it was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but it was pretty good. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put it on hold for a couple of years. And we have a lot of respect for each other. Said, okay, fine. You feel you want to put it on hold? Let's do it. So we didn't do it again for about 2.5, 3 years. And when I did it the next time, of course, it was a lot better and I felt more secure and everything was getting better. So this has been my method for my career. Some calculated risks to stretch and grow, and then coming back, doing some, even popping in a couple Mozarts that I don't do very much anymore, but still every once in a while, and something like Nemorino. So that has afforded me to grow. I finally hit puberty, and now I'm starting to sing some, big, more manly roles.
Big boy roles. Yeah,
right, big boy roles. Yeah.
Huh. Well, that's a whole other topic which I wasn't prepared to talk with you about, so maybe we'll shelve it. But the idea of a manager who actually understands Fach and understands the progression of roles, and is also looking out for their artists to make sure that they're not doing something that they're not ready for.
Yeah, that is a whole other show for I can imagine. But just as a quick note, there are some who know that, but usually it's the type who, first off, love singers. Second off, is like a complete opera nerd. They have to really know the rep and the traditions of who sang those roles, because there are many roles where you can find everyone from a dramatic tenor to a lighter tenor, all successfully singing a certain type of role or a certain role, and so there are many examples. It depends on your cast. It depends on where it is. So yeah, to have a manager that really knows that stuff, it's a bit rare. So, but I think it's the singer's job to know that first, because if they know it and maybe the manager doesn't know as much, you can still navigate the right way, so it's on the singer's shoulders to really take care of that.
Well, the topic I did want to talk with you about is one that's sort of an evergreen for us, which is the idea of being a parent in this business. And also you have the double impact of having a partner, Ekaterina Surina, who is also an internationally sought after artist. So you're looking at two opera singers with major careers. Can you please talk to us about what was it like to decide to start a family? What type of support system you had? And I definitely want to get into some of the nitty gritty about like just the logistics, like how do you, like who takes a contract, or do you just have full-time help, or are there parents involved? All of these things are very fascinating for us.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, this is the kind of thing that, you have to kind of make up as you go. Of course, I asked some colleagues who had been going through the same thing, and everyone has their own method. Everyone has their own support systems, like my parents, we didn't have the parent built-in support system as far as, a grandma who will say, okay, I'll come take care of the kids full time. Some people are lucky enough to have that. We didn't have that. My mom helped, in bits, she'd stay a couple months with us, and then we wouldn't, necessarily see her for a year because we'd be traveling so much. And then she would come for a couple months, travel a little bit, and then go back home, but we've had plenty of nannies, before, like au pairs. Sometimes they were great. Sometimes it didn't work out at all. It was just kind of a disaster. So we've tried everything. We used to homeschool our older boy because we were traveling so much at the time, both of us. And that was kind of okay for a while. But he wasn't getting as much, kind of just interaction with people. Yeah. And so at a certain point, he said, I kind of want to go to school. And I thought, yeah, that would be better for you. And plus, I was not made to be a teacher, that's for sure. I can hang out online with him and make sure. But I mean, by the time you get to sixth grade, math, you can count me out already. My math is so bad. I'm just like, what is this? This is not my job. So I had a lot of respect for teachers especially after the lockdown. Having to do that stuff. I thought, oh man. But we have played it, kind of by ear most of the time. But I would say that my wife Katerina, she never was crazy about the lifestyle of an opera singer anyway, even before we had kids. It wasn't really her thing. She would like to go to a job and then come home and stay and do the garden and do normal things, and then go for a nice job and then come back. Whereas I was completely different. I was just like, if I'm not singing, if I'm not out on the road traveling, I'm getting a little bit crazy at home. So, this is unfortunate, that it didn't match that way. But what ended up happening was that she was staying home more often than me. And then on the other end, and this is just honestly technical, the way the business works, a lot of times if you're a decent tenor, you can line up work quite early. So a lot of times I was getting good contracts before she would get a contract for the same time period. And then she was left with the dilemma of, should I just let you sing, or do I want to sing too? And what are we going to do with the kids at that time? So, it was always tricky, really tricky. Now that we live in Berlin full time, she's home more often, not only because a lot of things got canceled, but because she has chosen to do that more often. But they're at an age now, 14 and 7, where, sometimes friends of ours will stay for a few days, and they barely need any help. They do a lot. They're very independent. They've traveled since they were kids all over the world. So if she's gone for a couple of weeks and I'm gone for a week of that, and then I come home, it's not a problem. You know what I mean? So time has gone very fast, but it hasn't stopped being tricky with the logistics. But it's always, maybe it's my Latin blood or something, but, I always figure out a way, but sometimes it's last minute, who's going to hang out with the boys.
you live in Berlin.
Yes.
Have you always lived in Berlin?
No, so we were in, I grew up in Los Angeles. I was born in New York, but I grew up in Los Angeles since I was about 2 years old.
No, but with the kid, once you guys started having a family.
Yeah, that was definitely in LA. It started in LA
wow,
because my wife's from Russia, and if you take a girl from Russia and you show her Los Angeles, and she doesn't want to leave, So because it's sunny, it's nice, everything's all good. So we kind of settled there. We have a home there near my parents. But of course, I was traveling. I would say for the last, basically almost all my career has been based in Europe. So I would say 90 to 95% of my work usually is in Europe. So that's a long trip. You cannot go to LA on the weekends. You know what I mean? It's just not possible. So we struggled through that for quite a long time. And as it just got more and more difficult, I said, okay, it's enough. We're going to Europe. I had bought an apartment in Berlin probably about 15 years ago because I was singing there often, and it was dirt cheap at that time. Dirt cheap, and we needed a base in Europe because we were both singing in Germany and France and different places, so it made a lot of sense. We never lived there, but we would go when we sang there. We would stop and stay there for a couple of weeks while you sing a show, or even a month, and then leave. Sometimes we would go there, switch our baggage, change clothes. We left our winter clothes there, switch it up, and then go to the next place. We would rent it to singers sometimes here and there, friends and stuff. But then I eventually said, okay, it's enough. So about 3 years ago, we went full time to Berlin. So, it took a lot. I have an Italian passport also. So the logistics of actually becoming residents there were very, very easy. Even though Katerina and our boys, they don't have Italian citizenship, but because I have it, they immediately got their residency. So that was really great. And, then there was the whole issue of getting health insurance and getting them registered in school and, blah, 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 all the stuff. But I have to say, even in a way, it's been more tiring for me because now when I sing in Paris or London or wherever, if I have a couple of days off, I rush home, I fly home in 2 hours. And I have a couple of days, with the family, hang out with the boys, take them to school, do whatever. And then I fly back and do my next performance, or get back into rehearsals. So it's been much better in that sense. I see that. I don't have, until now, I don't have this, 6 to 8 week absence and literally not being able to come, And so now singing in Chicago, I've been, gone about 6 weeks almost. And I haven't been able to go. They've been in school, so they can't come. They're coming tomorrow, actually, because they have their 2-week kind of fall break. But yeah, so that's how it is now. But anyway, most of the time I'm in Europe, so it's better.
What languages are spoken at home, and what languages are they studying in? Are they studying? Are they in American school in Berlin, or are they?
No, actually. So I wanted that. Well, first off, Katerina speaks only Russian to them, so they speak Russian since childhood, and they speak English for me. And now they're speaking very good German because the little one goes to all German school because I thought, let him just go for it. He started school in Germany, so that's all he's known. So he's doing very well in German. And my older boy, Alessandro, who's 14, he goes to international school, but it's half and half German and half English. So he's also doing very well. So for me, I thought I will give them everything that I didn't quite have growing up. So right now they're basically trilingual, and Alessandro's studying Spanish already in school. So that's the next one. So it's
they're probably going to become CIA agents.
Yeah, that would be great, or something like that, or an international opera singer. I mean, who knows?
Do you have any anecdotes for us about? I just want to give you a chance to big up a company that was particularly helpful with understanding about your situation with having kids and having a wife who might be also doing a gig somewhere. Was there any company who was like, yes, we've got it. Here's somebody, we're going to assign this, whatever rehearsal production room to watch your kids for you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are not anything that I've seen in opera houses that are really set up, to help parents necessarily. Of course, there are certain teams and certain management at different opera houses who are very understanding of it. And well, before COVID, for example, I used to bring the boys, especially Katerina. She loves that, to bring the boys to rehearsal very often. And they feel at home in the theater because we brought them so many times. They're very well behaved because they know, how it is. They feel how it is. Nowadays it's a little bit more tricky because no one can come backstage anymore. But for example, in London, I was singing Covent Garden. Actually, we were singing together. We don't sing together too often, but sometimes. And we were doing a magic flute there several years ago now. The team said, "Oh, Alessandro's here. Why doesn't he? He could be in the show. He can be one of Papageno's little kids, that runs out, during the duet." And we said, "Yeah, that would be great. It would be so fun." So they sent him. He even got paid, and he was in his little costume, and he was having so much fun on stage. And when we did our bow, we had him in between us when we took our bow, and it was a great experience. He made a couple friends there that he still speaks to from England, that he still talks to, that were in the cast with him. So there's been a few times where it worked out well, but nowadays it's a little bit different, obviously. So I don't envy some parents now, because you really have to have someone at home, because you can't bring anyone to the theater.
So your career seems to be on the rise. I know it's been sort of a long game for you, but I feel like we are in the Casanova-sance right now. And
I hope so.
I'm so, looking forward to the next thing. And I think we should acknowledge that your success is coming now, despite the very big disadvantage you have of being just a very unattractive person. It's really hard to look at you.
Well, you can. Well, you can't have everything. I got the hair. That's about it.
So you're a very good-looking guy,
Thank
and my audience knows me, that I'm trying to be very well behaved here.
It's okay. I'm
but,
relaxed. I cannot be offended. Don't worry.
Do you have any tips about how you manage to keep the upper body strength? I mean, in Elixir of Love, you're basically parading around in a tank top, and one scene, and all the women, the chorus are ooh.
Yeah, a bit handsy there. Yeah.
Is fitness part of your, what you do just to be marketable?
Yeah, well, I never think, well, okay, no, that would be a lie. I don't not ever think that it is important. It is important. But it's something that I always enjoy doing anyway, because it's one way I deal with stress, because stress just sucks, as we all know. So for me, exercising just, kind of pushes some of that back, the normal stresses of life, of course, of having a family and traveling all the time, being alone all the time. And then, of course, the career itself, it's not, it's really tricky sometimes. You have to fight your own demons all the time. And I would say 70% of them are not vocal, but mental. You know what I mean? So I think exercise helps me with that. On the other side of it, nowadays, the visual is more important than it used to be. I don't agree that it should be more important than the singing. I do still think that singing and the voice is really the most important part of it. But if we can be extremely honest, in this type of time, this day that we live in, it's more and more important now, the looks. Not only to be believable in the roles that you're playing, but we're just a visual society. We want to see something beautiful. I don't want to say anything bad about any particular pop star, for example, but my favorite music is in the 60s and 70s and even 80s. And those musicians were usually incredible. They wrote incredible songs, great lyrics. Of course, you've got the silly 80s songs too, but a lot of them were, incredible musicians. They played their own instruments. They wrote their own songs. Are they the most pretty? Usually not. When you see some of those bands, you think, Okay, back then, of course, they were the sex symbols, but some of them you think now you're like, it's not the most beautiful, air supply. They weren't the most pretty guys ever. They're not like the boy bands of, let's say the 90s or 2000s, who are much more, cute, handsome dudes or whatever.
And now they're androgynous. Now they're
that's a whole other story. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it was more, the focus was more on the songwriting and the way they played and all those things. Whereas nowadays, it's not as much that as, let's just be honest. So sometimes I think some things fall through the cracks. So I do appreciate that I can use some of my natural attributes, and I pay attention to them, but I never rely on them because I love the music too much. So I'm really trying to get better. And if some of the people say, "Oh, you look cute," then I'll say, "Awesome, thank you very much. That's really great." But I won't go crazy. I'll just concentrate on the singing more than I don't have a 6-pack. It's too much work. It's just too crazy. But I can do some stuff and be fit. But I don't want to get too crazy.
Thanks again to Oliver and tenor Charles Castronovo for his time inside the huddle. A little bit of sports before we get to the second seg of the show. This is a dreadful time for Chicago sports. If you've listened to the show long enough, you know that here we are in Chicago. We love the sports teams. This is like the 40 years in the desert right now. White Sox completely beaten up and injured. Cubs on a major losing streak at Wrigley Field, which, by the way, has the highest average single ticket price in Major League Baseball. Blackhawks didn't make the playoffs. The Bulls fall to the hated Milwaukee Bucks. And the Bears are doing what the Bears do best, which is hire a new front office and then pretend that there's a whole bunch of optimism and that things are actually going to change and turn around. They do this approximately every 5 to 6 years. And maybe they'll throw in a move to the suburbs and threaten to build a new stadium. The Bears are just being the Bears right now. Here's where it is hot in sports, and I can't believe I'm saying this. Miami, Florida. Get this, last weekend, while Rich Strike was blowing away the pack at Churchill Downs, in Miami, you had the Miami Heat in the NBA playoffs. You had the Florida Panthers in the NHL playoffs, and the Florida Panthers, I'm not sure the last time was when they went to the NHL playoffs. And most importantly, you had the Miami International Grand Prix, which is part of the Formula One circuit. This is the first of a 10-year contract that Miami has signed, and only Miami does it best. It was built on a specific track on the outskirts of Miami, for which the infield features swimming pools, a sandy beach, and a fake marina with 5 yachts on it. Who needs motor racing when you have all those toys? In January of this year, Ashley Hargave came up with a great new idea for a segment. It was so great, and it happened so fast, we didn't even have a name for it. We have a name for it now. Sportzando, lovingly coined by co-host Matt Cummings and lovingly recorded by Norm Waddell. The idea behind the segment, which has returned a couple times since then and will continue, was what is the intersection between sports and music? How has opera and music influenced sports, and how have sports influenced opera and music? Ashley kicked it off with a phenomenal piece on the NBA and John Tesh. Check it out.
I was watching the Summer Olympics last summer, and the basketball preliminaries were happening, and I heard this familiar tune, which I'm going to sing for you so that we don't get copyrighted. Take that, bots! And the tune was... Okay, so if
very
you're of a certain
syncopated.
Age, yes, very syncopated. If you're of a certain age, that It stays with you, and even if you don't know it, you know it. I was like, I know this. I know what this is. It doesn't feel like it's supposed to be in the Olympics, but it goes with something. And so I went on what I call an internet spelunk. I dove down. I lowered myself into all of the buckets I could find. And I found out that that song was called Round Ball Rock, which is also known as the NBA on NBC theme. And that ran on television from 1990 to 2002 when it played 12,000 times in its original run.
It bookended the Bulls' three-peats, both of them.
Abso-freaking-lutely. Yeah. So NBC revived it when they covered the Olympics basketball team. So that's when we heard it in 2008, 2016, and the 2020 Olympics, which were actually the ones where I heard it last summer in 2021. Fox got the rights to this 4 years ago for college hoops, but I haven't heard it there yet. But to be fair, I'm not watching a lot of college hoops on Fox. Okay, when I poorly sang that theme, how many of you actually remembered something in the back of your brain?
Yeah, definitely.
The fact that I don't really has no bearing on whether or not this is relevant to pop culture.
We're taking it to Grandpa. Oliver, you're my only hope. Did you recognize the theme?
I'm not sure if it was in the right octave for me, and I have a very small brain. So I don't hear the exact accurate historical pitch.
He has perfect pitch. He can hear every
2 out of
single
5.
note.
You know what? Fine. I will sing you a caller.
But also, I don't watch NBA. That's the thing.
Yeah, but to be fair, this was the NBA of 1990 to 2002. So this was a while back. Yeah. All right. So at any rate, there is this insanely recognizable piece of music. It's tied to sports history. And then I spelunked a little bit further into finding out the history and the backstory of this song. And guys, it's a doozy. So, okay, so that was written by John Tesh, Round Ball Rock was. Which, yes, pause for laughter, pause for giggles, pause for whatever your memories are of John Tesh. Ladies and gents, if you don't know who John Tesh is, we're going to go on a wild ride, and I'm going to leave you presents to see on our website after this show is up. So he was commissioned by the NBA to write this theme in the late 1980s. If you don't know about John Tesh in the late 80s, do yourself a favor, Google him. The visuals are majestic. So he's on tour.
That is...
Yes. Yeah. Dude in real time, folks. You're all watching. You're all listening on smartphones. Google John Tesh right now. TESH. So he is on tour with his classical and rock fusion orchestra. Yes, that was a thing.
Amazing.
In Europe. And he gets this idea for this commission he needs to write for the NBA. And keep in mind, this is late 80s, 1989. So he has no iPhone. There's no recorder. He doesn't have a piano in his hotel room. So what does he do? He calls his house in Los Angeles and he sings the message into his home answering machine so he doesn't forget it. Oh, right. I realize some of our listeners are young.
Millennials
So children
today have no idea what this story means.
It would be similar to taking out your phone and taking a picture of something that you have to remember for later. Which is my...
Yes.
It makes me feel like an old man now that I say that out loud because the Gen Zs are coming for me. I can feel them breathing down the back of my neck, but I think it's the same sort of vibe.
Aren't you
That's
a Gen
correct.
Z yourself?
No, I'm a baby millennial. I'm like one of the last few millennials. So that means I've got to worry about taxes, and I don't know what fleek is.
Topical reference from
Just
10
stop.
years ago.
Please stop.
You're nailing it. So for you baby birds out there who don't know, an answering machine is when you would call and leave a voicemail and it would record to a cassette tape in your home residence. That is where he documented this so that he could remember the theme. So there is an incredible video of him actually telling this story in a concert live at Red Rocks. And then he pulls out the actual answering machine that he used to record it and then performs the entire theme with his classical rock orchestra.
Oh,
it
amazing.
We're going to have the video on our website. We're going to have a series. I'm leaving you a whole bunch of gifts this week. And when I tell you the BD energy, the sexual Yanni Red Rocks rockin' chemistry, it's bonkers. It's absolutely
Between
amazing.
him and the answering machine?
Are we talking Trans-Siberian Orchestra feels?
It's that vibe. It's that vibe. More Mandarin collars and shiny vests, but yes, definitely that vibe.
That goes without saying, I think.
There is also this really incredible sketch from Saturday Night Live, maybe 10-ish years ago, that actually goes into what the creation of this theme might have been. At any rate, there's amazing stories behind this. And what this did, it got me thinking. there are stories behind all of these different types of music, the stories behind the roles that music plays in these punctuated moments within sports history, and believe it or not, how the reverse happens, how sports punctuates the history of our genre. These super fun backstories that, like, you didn't know you needed. So today, I'm going to tell you how BBC made a Turandot aria the prevailing anthem for world soccer.
Please tell.
Signore Ascolta?
So close. So very, very close. So it's 1990. The World Cup is happening. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Company, is getting ready to cover the World Cup. Producers there choose a 1972 recording of Luciano Pavarotti singing Nessun Dorma with the London Phil and Zubin Mehta, and they use it as the soundtrack to their credits. Now, let's think, this is a big risk for the BBC to use this. Most sports coverage of this time, 1990, had like 80s rock and synthesizers, decidedly not a 1926 opera aria, but a producer wanted to capture this emotive and dramatic nature of the World Cup and was fixated on like the swells and the soars of this aria. And most importantly, the word vincerò, which is I will win. Got it. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the games that year were in Italy, so it seemed like a match. So initially, the producers matched this aria with a clip of Marco Tardel's ecstatic celebration after scoring in the 1982 World Cup. And this is a clip they put together for the World Cup draw, just the draw. It went over so well that they decided to go for total emotional manipulation, and they use the aria as the opening and the end credits. Pretty much any place they could jam it in during BBC's World Cup coverage, they put it in. There's an article that was on the website The 42, which talks about the creation of this, and I quote, "Producers used the image of Tardelli as he ran away." I said Tardel earlier, excuse me. Producers used the image of Tardelli as he ran away with his arms spread and mouth wide open in delirium. As the climax came, it was a mix of current and past grace, which we graphically stylized to fit in with the overall feel of the titles, and of course with the music. Tardelli's celebration was the crucial shot for the finale, mouth agape to the mirror of Pavarotti's voice.
The original lip sync for your life.
None shall sleep indeed.
Yes.
Maybe I'm the only person on the panel who remembers this happening in real time. So Italia 90, that was my second World Cup after Mexico City in 86. And I remember this voice. I did not, of course, know who Pavarotti was at the time, or Tardelli for that matter. But I remember those images synchronized with that voice and being like, this is absolutely incredible.
I have to tell you, the editing on this, we have this clip also, so I can show it to you, but man, let me tell you, the editors deserve every Emmy imaginable. It really is. It tugs at your heartstrings. If you can divorce yourself from, like, what's actually happening, because Koloff kind of sucks, but if you're thinking about just the words, I will win, as you're watching these victorious, football players running around and, mouth agape and embracing, it's amazing. It is absolutely epic. And I'm not the only one that thought so. Football fans went wild for this collaboration on the BBC. So by the time the tournament reached the semis, 26 million people were tuning into BBC's broadcasts and seeing this every day. So people who never knew who he was or what the opera was, Gesundheit Oliver, suddenly were half singing Nessun Dorma all over the place. So you could hear people just, humming this along. They recognized this tune, not knowing anything about opera. So it becomes a big deal, it becomes a big hit, and in turn, a lot of people who didn't know who Pavarotti was all of a sudden do, and he becomes this big stock within pop culture. The recording at the time was like 20 years old. It hit number 2 on the UK charts in 1990.
Wow.
And that's back when charts used to mean something.
Yeah, that's true.
People still bought CDs.
Something, yes.
And listened to the radio.
Exactly. And the telly. The hype only heightened. So Pavarotti goes to perform the aria in concert at Rome on the eve of the 1990 Italia World Cup final. This concert was coincidentally also the first performance of the Three Tenors, who also performed Nessun Dorma together. So you get the birth of this pop culture sensation and then followed by a second pop culture sensation, all on the
original
of the World
El
Cup
Divo.
final. That is correct.
The original
That is-
boy band.
This also feels like the origin story for how we got the Aretha Franklin Nessun Dorma from the Grammys.
Oh, absolutely.
We will get into that one in another segment. I have an entire analysis
So excited.
and thoughts and feelings. She's got her purse. She puts it on the piano. She goes. It's amazing. She splits the word Vincero into 18 syllables. It's incredible. So Pavarotti now has this huge thing in his pocket, and he really ends up becoming, sort of not the anthem singer, but the anthem singer for all of these different sports events, most specifically in Italy. It becomes what we would call his sports swan song. And it was actually his last public performance as well. 2006 Winter Olympics in Torino, year before his death.
Probably a step down.
Yes. That's how it is. But at any rate, BBC turned Nessun Dorma into a prevailing anthem for world soccer, and it's been going for 30 years strong, even most recently as Euro 2020, when it was performed by Andrea Bocelli, where the scene of the crime, Roma, Italia.
Amazing.
What I'm hearing you say is that this is the anthem, throw all your hands up.
Yeah.
A delayed reaction to that Good Charlotte reference. Making it
That's well
1997
Like,
again through
there
fear
was
or magic.
there was air
Right.
between the joke and the laugh. Like it was a pause.
What's Italian for I'm coming out, so you better get this party started? We should,
Well,
should
any
find out.
aria di
but-
sortite would fit that, But what we should figure out, we should get ahead of this, and we should figure out what is the unmined great aria that can be the next sports anthem.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Something for Team Canada.
Oh, I can't think of any maple syrup based operas, unfortunately.
Yeah. Would it be in French or in English? Depends on how far east or west
Okay,
you
well,
are,
we
I
could
suppose.
put that to our listeners to think of one, and we'll come back to you next time we do the segment with our.
Would
ideas.
anyone but Celine Dion sing it?
It does need to be sort of like eminently singable, right? And I'm not saying that anyone can sing Nessun Dorma, but kind of anybody can sing Nessun Dorma.
I mean, well,
if
I
you're
think
a
that there's
football fan and you've had enough pints in you, you can really soar on those tops.
I mean, that's correct. More importantly, what I'm going to amend, I'm going to yes and your suggestion and say that it needs to be able to be half sung by boundless groups of hooligans. We need a bunch of drunk Scotsmen and Irishmen and Englishmen leaning back and forth and half singing this with no syllables whatsoever.
Be kind and courteous is definitely the winner.
I mean, we've fallen a long way when the anthem for Euro 2020 when England won was "Sweet Caroline."
Good
It's
times never
phenomenal
cease.
that Pavarotti was 20 years old. I mean, he was in American.
No, he wasn't
terms-
20-year-old. You're confused.
the recording. He was
The
20
recording
years
was
old.
20
The
years old.
recording was 20 years old. So the recording that they used in 1990.
Thank you for. I was
This from
confused. I was like, this is.
1972.
That would involve a little bit of time travel, which might have been a little difficult for the budget of the BBC at the time.
Now,
now
who knows?
with
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Doctor
Now you can do
Who
anything.
knows.
With the metaverse,
Bring him back
yeah,
as a
you're-
hologram. You're good to go.
The only downside of the 1990 World Cup, of course, is that England would lose in the semifinal on penalties to then West Germany and then lose in the third place game to the Italians. Some things never change, George.
We
So
had
sad.
didn't we have England versus Italy in our
We did.
Euro Cup last
We
year?
did. And Barese, that quack, he had the Italians winning the whole thing. I mean, you can't trust him. Barese, you can
Can't trust
the
that
Italians.
Antonio Barese.
Somehow came down on the side of the Italians.
I don't know how
Ashley-
that happened.
You've got a whole bunch more stories in your pocket for the future. Can you tease us on just one of those stories that might appear in a future episode? Where musical
yeah,
moments
for
and intersection.
For sure. There are a lot of... You know that neighbor that lives in your building that you walk past and you see all the time, but you don't actually say hi to that often? That's the relationship between baseball and opera. And there's going to be a lot of times where baseball and opera intersect, and a lot of times where they cross paths, and a lot of times where facilities for opera might be used to communicate the outcome of sporting events.
That was utterly
Stay
delightful.
tuned.
Just like that segment. Again, if you have a title for the brand new seg, you can tweet us at operaboxscore. If you're watching on TDO, you want to make sure you subscribe to the podcast, get the full show, Stitcher, Spotify, click follow, Apple Podcasts, smash the plus.
And if you choose the winning segment, you get to have Norm Waddell say those words on our show, and you know that you were the inspiration.
That was you.
And you get to stay at Oliver's house.
And if you don't get chosen, you should feel really guilty.
Good call. Bad call. On Opera Box Score.
All right, time to wrap this show up. Good call, bad call. If you haven't seen the HBO TV series South Side yet, you absolutely have to see it. Sports? No. Chicago? Yes. It is some of the funniest, most honest stuff coming out right now, in my opinion, that is about Chicago. Check it out, season 2 of South Side on HBO. That's it for this week's edition of America's Talk radio show about opera. Our announcer, Norm Waddell, he's at normwaddell.com. Send us that voice memo or email. Get your hot takes to us, operaboxscore@gmail.com. You're going to get an OBS beer coaster and an OBS lapel pin just for sharing your own hot take. Our creative consultant is Oliver Camacho. Our audio and video editor is Weston Williams. For your co-hosts, Matt Cummings and Ashley Hardgrave, I'm George Cedarquist, asking you to continue the conversation about opera as you work on those spring flowers. We're back with an all-new show next week when we highlight the key players in America's summer opera season. It's going to be a lot of baseball, I think, as well. And that, plus you're going to get more opera headlines, more hot takes, and just more goodwill. Join us.